자, 여러분.
Then let us begin the last session of today's conference. The third session is titled Adapt and Thrive Through Innovation. This will look into options and the opportunities for us to ensure co-prosperity and development of the entire industry based on the industrial innovation as well as the technological development. Let me introduce today's panel and speakers. We are joined by Professor Jean-Paul Rodriguez of Hofstra University. He will serve as a moderator too. And we are also joined by Mr. Tino Clem, Vice President of Hamburg Port Authority. Mr. Tino Clem, would you please come and join us on the stage?
Good evening. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. He is joining us online. And our next speaker is Dr. Dong-Gyu Choi, Executive Vice President of DSME. Last but not the least, Mr. Simon Peach, Managing Director of Quina and Nagel, Korea. Thank you. Please take your seat. Now I'd like to hand the floor over to the moderator.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. In good shape? Cheerful? Don't worry, it's going to be over soon. Okay. First of all, obviously, my condolences regarding the tragic event that took place last week. I would say when I first saw that, I was quite amazed, to say the least, about this. And it's something people are going to be talking for a long time, that's for sure. Anyway, okay. So what we're going to obviously do for the last segment of today's presentation discussions, we're going to talk about what I call the 2 Ds. There was some kind 5 Ds early on, but we'll focus on 2 of those Ds. That is digitization and decarbonization. And we have an interesting, I would say, group of people. Regarding this, I am an observer. As an academic, I'm not involved in the process, so I try to figure out trends, patterns, I would say advantages, pitfalls, drawbacks, disasters also. But also we have also, of course, 3 practitioners involved in that process of digitization and decarbonization. And more than 3 practitioners, I would say 3 leaders, because we have somebody from Mr. Dong-Gyu Choi, which is involved in the shipbuilding, which basically have a very strong influence on the industry by future design, future, I would say, configuration of ships. We have also a leader with HPA, which is the Hamburg Port Authority, which has been quite active in implementing, you could say, energy and decarbonization strategy. So we're going to hear about that. And last and not least, obviously, we have a global logistic leaders in the name of Kuehne Nagel. So bear this in mind. So we'll see what these, I would say, leaders have to say regarding these, I would say, very confusing trend. I've been trying to following the industry all my life, and the last decade or so have been very confusing because there's so many trends taking place, so many processes, so many innovations, that it is, I would say, difficult to make some sense of it. So please allow me for the next 5 hours. Is that okay? Less than that? Oh, okay. For the last, I would say, I will speak about 15 minutes or so to give you my overview, I would say, big picture idea, and then we'll leave the real experts, the real practitioners, talk about what is actually happening. So what we have here is part of a chapter in my textbook, which is Port Economics, which is published by 2 of my colleagues, Theo Notteboom, which probably many of you know, and Thanos Pallis, which are, I would say, long-term collaborators. Let's see if I can run this. Okay, so let's talk about this digitization taking place. What is it? What it is not? And more than often, it comes with disappointments. Because when you talk about these processes, particularly, again, decarbonization and digitization, you have some expectations. It seems to be some kind of a silver bullet, a magic, those words that you say that it's like sustainability. It's supposed to mean everything, and at the same time, it doesn't mean much. So we'll try to figure out what's happening. So I'm going to focus here on two aspects, which are fairly different to what the others are going to talk about. I'm going to talk about what are the major trends in digital transformation in maritime shipping. A little bit about port community systems, which, again, it's, I would say, an interesting development. It's been ongoing for quite a long time. And something which, interestingly, we have not talked about much, because when we talk about digital technologies, we talk about also cybersecurity issues. It's quite mind-boggling, the number of attacks, the number of attempts that is done to sabotage, take control of systems. And the more we digitize, the more we create opportunities for systems to be attacked and taken over. Each time we had a new automated piece of equipment, you just added up a new potential point of failure in the system. So if you increase the number of these systems almost exponentially, you increase those risks at the same time exponentially. And from time to time, we have very big reminders of the risk and pitfalls of this. Nobody likes to see their system hijacked with a Trojan and some kind of a ransomware. And that's going to happen again in the future. It's almost a certainty. And I'm going to focus a little bit about terminal automation, not too much. Okay, so what is interesting about digitization? It's, I would say, several things which are happening at the same time, several realms of innovation. And I try here to identify what are the key drivers. And each and one of them is the object of several specific wave of development, its own, you could say, scientific discipline. And all of them converge in some matters. You basically shake and bake, mix them, and it leads to some kind of outcome. So of course it's robotics, AI, automation, Internet of Things, blockchain, big data, and VR, virtual reality, which is linked these days with what we call digital twins. That is, you want to operate in a fully automated aspect. You need to recreate, I would say, the reality, almost exactly so that the automation process can navigate. So you need the virtual to navigate within the virtual, and the virtual must reflect the reality. So all of this creates, when you put them together, creates a process, outcomes within the industry, and that's essentially a list of those. Again, I mentioned here 4. There might obviously be more, but the key drivers, of course, automation, we talk a lot about that, all the decision-making process which are involved in port community system, and of course, all the process automation, inventory management, asset management, bundling, and last and not least, all of these documentation, which the pandemic have accelerated quite substantially. Okay, here's a list of the expectations. What you want when you do something like that. And again, the list is not very complicated. It's pretty well known. You want visibility. You want to manage what you have more efficiently, so more bang for the buck. You want efficiency. You want a capacity to exchange supply and demand more efficiently. Sometimes we call that Uberization. That's why it's so successful. It was able to create a platform where you were, I would say, matching very effectively supply and demand. So that's what you expect. And you expect, obviously, to fill up the paperwork. Lots of it, and more and more. Okay, so those are the expectations. And here's the fun part. When we look at the literature, you look at what's been accomplished, we have a very difficult time to measure actually the outcome of these expectations. We were seeing in the previous session that for Singapore, automation was fantastic. It seems to be great. But I've seen other cases where automation does not lead to much that substantial gain in productivity, and sometimes more of a mess. So it's an interesting question under what circumstances these expectations are reconciled with the reality and what metrics to use. And so far, we have not been able very effectively to measure that. It's going to change, but it's more expectation. Now we can start with port community system. Again, here's a list. It's not exhaustive, but it's moving quite rapidly. Now every major port in the world has built that. But this is what I found, again, from a cybersecurity perspective. All of these platforms appear to have been developed locally, in-house, with their own priority, their own system, their own programming. So it appears that there's no particular, as far as I can tell, no particular global standard in port community system. And I would say each of these systems may represent some kind of a potential security trouble to be hacked in some ways because it was developed internally. So that's something you have to bear in mind. Are we going to see in the future some kind of a standardization like containerization? Maybe we're going to see eventually some kind of a common type of system. But so far, the ports have developed that locally based upon their own respective need, their own respective design, and we got a multiplicity of systems involved in this process. As long as they can talk to one another, should be fine. And then blockchain. In my life, I've never seen so much, if you excuse my French, BS than blockchain about expectations regarding reality. It's getting there eventually, but it was supposed to be that miracle technology which was supposed to help substantially. And so far, not that much, but they're good examples. Again, of course, the trade lance is a very salient example. It's been implemented, and it's supposed not to be hacked. But the problem with these systems is actually they can be hacked. They can be, I would say, messed up with, not internally, but through the sensors, to the points of entry, which, again, show a level of vulnerability of these systems. And obviously, when you implement that, you create these complex chains. That's I would say, simplification of a supply chain with all the elements of a blockchain. And I would say it's a transaction type of rich environment with a lot of complexity. And to be able to replicate this system into the effective real supply chain management, it's going to take quite a long time. But again, we are going to get there. How, under what circumstances, it remains to be seen. Okay, with this said, cyber attacks. Some of you have heard quite a lot about that, but keep this in mind, that the more digitization that we have, the more risk that we create. And here's a very big difference between, let's say, the financial industry and the maritime shipping industry and the port industry when we talk about cyber attacks, is in the financial industry, essentially the cyber attack basically simply try to take advantage of a virtual system of transactions, accounts, financial transaction. But when we deal with cyber attack in the logistic industry, we're dealing with cyber attack in an asset-rich industry. And therefore, it is potentially much more damageable in some ways because of that. And I wonder what type of problems and risks is going to arise in the future regarding this. And I wonder, again, something we don't know about, maybe we can draw an analogy with piracy that took place. You remember good old times, 10 years ago, when you have a problem about piracy. Most of the time, the response from many shipping lines was simply to pay the ransom. And because the cargo was so valuable, because it was a very expensive asset. And I wonder with cyber attack, what's going to happen? Are they going to pay or not? Again, the example of Maersk is a very interesting case study because it was not, I would say, a ransom. It was simply a destruction of the IT system. So you're going to need to build what we call cyber resiliency. And that's coming up from the work of the International Association of Port Authorities that have done, I would say, some interesting background work about potential measures. It's basic stuff. Anybody who is involved in IT and computer science knows that pretty well. But since the maritime shipping industry is much more traditional and IT is much more new, there is, I would say, a culture of cyber resiliency that needs to be built in much more effectively within the port. Again, it's getting there, that's for sure. Otherwise, we'll have a problem. Now, automation. That's also a lot of fun. To say the least, in terms of, and it's very difficult to define it because it can involve so many different things, from autonomous ships, autonomous vehicles, to the yard operation, and all the way to the automated gate, or I would say self-driving vehicle. It goes all the way down to the warehouses as well. So there's a whole range of potential application of automation. And what we found out, and that's something very interesting, containerization was supposed to be some kind of a standard design. So most of the container terminals around the world were having relatively, depending upon the equipment you use, similar yard configuration. And then automation came in. And now you can visually distinguish an automated terminal from a non-automated terminal because of the yard configuration. So that's one example of what automation can have, just in terms of terminal design. And again, a very good example for those, I think you will recognize that one, between a conventional and an automated terminal. That's the case of Busan here. And we forgot the new one, which is Busan Container Terminal, which is just on the other side here. And actually, it is visually possible to distinguish what is a standard container terminal compared with an automated terminal. But here's an interesting question. Is an automated terminal more resilient than a standard container terminal? I do not have answers to that question because we have not yet faced some form of what type of pressure they have been faced. So there's something interesting. Which one is the most resilient? Good question. I'll skip that. It's simply wave of introduction of the technology. It's pretty standard stuff. It's growing exponentially, obviously. So we start having around, again, it depends how you measure them. It's a really something tough call. What is the inventory of global automated container terminal? About 65, again, give or take. But still, when I like this because it's a reminder, we always historically have all realistic expectations. We always get things wrong, okay? Same thing, I did an analysis of all the computer forecast, the port forecast models around the world for a very long period of time. You look at what they were forecasting. All of the forecast models have they all have one thing in common. And guess what it is? They're all wrong. All the time. There's always something happening in between. So we'll be wrong, as they were wrong in the 1960s. They were expecting automation, but they have then to replace pretty much all the unskilled jobs. That was not the case. Here came China. Okay, so that's based upon the work of some of my colleagues, and they did an analysis of the drivers, and they realized that the expectation and what we expected to take place and what was actually taking place were not the same. The number one factor that was driving automation based upon a survey was basically safety. And then unit cost, variability in performance, labor costs as well. And my opinion, I was always expecting that automated terminals are those who are facing the most pressure in terms of available land. I said that was the core driver. You automate because you want to intensify your asset, but it looks like it was the last factor being put into consideration. So I was surprised by that. I'll skip that one. We're a little bit running out of time. And also the view about automation varies substantially depending upon who you talk to. And I think you see here the dock workers, to be expected. They tend to perceive the automation quite negatively in red, as opposed to the shippers and the government and the port authorities that tend to perceive automation quite, I would say, positively. So that's something which is, of course, a little bit of a tug of war. Last slide here. So this is my inventory of all the automated terminals in the world as of now, as far as I could get. So I was able to account for 68 of them. And that represents about 8.5% of all the terminals in the world can be considered automated. But if you measure this in terms of footprint, that's about 14–15% of all among the largest container terminals in the world are automated. But here's all the drawbacks with this. Obviously, high investment cost. We tend to forget about labor. An automated terminal versus a standard container terminal is a different set of skills. And actually, the people in the industry are telling me they have difficult time finding people in IT, because if you know IT, you're trained into information technology, you have a very difficult time. You're going to be in demand by other sectors, so why work for the shipping and logistic industry? It's not interesting. I would work for a bank, and it's much way more attractive. Okay. I don't think he likes what I just said. Okay. Then again, that's something very interesting. Many of it, you don't automate because of the risk of disruption. If you do that, you have to basically phase out some of your yard space to do that, and you don't want to run out of this. And last and not least, the whole labor issue. Labor contracts. If you don't believe me, see what's happening on the US West Coast regarding automation. It's a very, very contentious issue. So with this said, actually, that's enough. Thank you. And we'll move on to the next presenter, which is Tino Clems. Are you ready, Tino?
Yes, I am ready, and sorry for the interruption. I didn't see that my microphone was on. Yes. Yeah, good evening together. Dear ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank you very much for the invitation. These words are somewhat wishful, as I would very much appreciate the direct exchange, and I would very much like to be on site in Busan. Unfortunately, this is not possible this year due to many parallel commitments, such as the meeting of the supervisory board in this week. Nevertheless, the new technologies make it a lot of possible, and I'm very much looking forward to discuss exciting and forward-looking topics. International exchange in particular is the key to solving the problems of our future. I have to ask the organization how it works with the presentation, so sorry, but I don't know how can I use my presentation. Jean-Paul, did you have an answer?
I don't see the presentation.
Hello?
Yeah, but it's not just
We have a click.
just a second, they're trying to set it up to display on the screen.
Yeah, okay.
Back of us, and
Thank you.
I'll tell you when it's available. Do you have control on your side? Can you forward your slides?
No.
No? Okay, so I'll take care of the clicking. Can you in the back please put the presentation? There, some kind of technical issue.
Now I see the presentation. Wonderful. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
So now yes, maybe you can click if I say next slide. Jean-Paul, yes? Okay, thank you. Okay, my name is Tino Klen. I have been working for the Hamburg Port Authority since 2005 and have been a member of the Executive Board since 2017. Today, I have a pleasure of telling you about the extensive implementation of innovative and green technologies in the Port of Hamburg. I would like to start my presentation with information about the Port of Hamburg and a look at its special features in order to show the necessity of the transformation to a digital zero-emission port. Building on this, I will then illustrate the front-runner role of the Port of Hamburg using concrete projects. Next slide, please. Okay, once more. Yes, thank you. The Port of Hamburg is Germany's gateway to the world, and at the same time, with almost 130 million tons of sea cargo handled in 2021, one of the most important transshipment centers in Europe. The unique characteristics of the Port of Hamburg becomes apparent when you look at this map on the city of Hamburg. The Port of Hamburg is located in the heart of the city and consumes about 10% of this surface. This results in two challenges for the Port of Hamburg. Firstly, around 1.9 million inhabitants are directly exposed to ship emissions of all kinds. And secondly, hardly any expansion in terms of area is difficult, so the available land must be used more efficiently through the use of innovative digital technologies. I will now show you how these challenges are being concretely addressed in Hamburg. Next slide. In any case, a core project of the Port of Hamburg is the shore power project. In the following, I would like to show not only the relevance of shore power systems, but also how they are implemented in the Port of Hamburg. On the right on the slide, you can see an aerial view of the Port of Hamburg showing the amount of nitrogen oxide emission at different points in the port. The largest part of the emission, almost 75%, does not occur during the passage through the port, but at the berth. The prevailing wind from the southwest then carried them into the residential areas. This underlines the immense need to reduce emission at berths in particular and the effectiveness of shoreside electricity. Next slide. The HPA has been meeting this need for several years. A shore power system for cruise ships has been in operation since 2016. Its location is marked by the green oval on the top of the slide. The HPA is currently expanding its commitment to shoreside power. As early as next year, 4 more terminals will be equipped with shore power units. And already in 3 years' time, all 4 container terminals and all 3 cruise terminals will be shore power capable. The investment volume for the entire project amounts to around 105 million euros. Next slide. Finally, I would like to take a look at the results of the measures. This chart shows the CO2 emissions in tons per year of 50 top quays and Hamburg. The described program can address 60% of the emission. However, the graph also underlines the need for the number of shore power capable ships to continue to increase. To provide you with concrete numbers, the shoreside power unit already installed since 2016 made it possible to reduce emission by just under 1,300 tons of CO2 in 2020. The figure has been steadily increased since the beginning. With the construction of the additional facilities, an annual saving of 43,000 tons of CO2 is expected by 2030. This clearly shows that the Port of Hamburg has taken on responsibility in climate protection. Next slide. In addition to shoreside electricity, hydrogen in particular is a topic that is also receiving intensive media coverage these days. I would also like to provide you with information on the implementation of this issue in the Port of Hamburg. Next slide. The Port of Hamburg will be an important location for the production and consumption of hydrogen. The port offers the potential to develop a local integrated value chain for hydrogen, and it's a perfect place to implement all kinds of mobility applications in logistics on rail, road and waterways. You can see an idea of this value chain in the graphic on the right. The Port of Hamburg is a suitable location for such a value chain for several reasons. On the supply side, in addition to its predestinated role for imports, the port also takes on the role of producer through the use of renewable energies from offshore wind farms. On the consumption side, opportunities arise in the use as fuel for mobility, but also in particular in the primary industry, which are located in the Port of Hamburg as well as players with a very high energy demand. If a network is created between all actors, a hydrogen ecosystem will emerge inside the port. The HBA's function here is an enabler, as we bring together all relevant actors and ensure, for example, that the necessary companies settle here in our port area. To this end, we are already active in many international, but also local networks and have entered into a number of corporations. Our ambition is to enable green logistic chains at all. Next slide. A concrete example of our efforts is the HYPA, Hydrogen Port Application Project. The framework of this project, we have pursuing three main goals. First, we want to implement a multimodal hydrogen refueling station. It should be usable across all modes of transport in order to minimize logistic costs through economy of scale. Secondly, Hamburg has to be developed into a hydrogen hub so that various alternative fuels can be made available. Hydrogen can be available in different aggregation states. Prominent examples of these are methanol and ammonia. And thirdly, we are focusing on the construction of ships with innovative propulsion systems that include hydrogen. For hydrogen technology as a whole, economies of scale are indispensable to enable efficient use. With this project, the HBA is making a significant contribution. Next slide. As I have already mentioned, one focus is one of the operation of new, innovative and highly environmentally friendly ships. I would like to show you this with a few examples. Our subsidiary, Flotte Hamburg, which is responsible for the ship fleet managed of the HBA, is heavily focusing on electrification and hydrogen as innovative and green propulsion technologies. For several years they have operating plug-in hybrid ships. Only recently the bed leveler Chicago was added, which you can see in the upper left picture. Not only can these ships run electrically for 2 hours and thus be emission-free, but they are also low emission in regular operation thanks to use of exhaust gas after treatment and the synthetic fuel GTL. In addition, the Flotte Hamburg is participating in an international research consortium to develop a particularly innovative ship that uses a methanol fuel cell. Such international cooperations of all kinds and exchange are of immense importance to accelerate the transformation of ports into zero-emission ports. Next slide. Finally, I would like to address the need for digitalization. This not only makes it possible to use existing resources more efficiently, but also to reduce emissions. Again, I would like to visualize this with a concrete example. Next slide. For this purpose, I would like to mention the Santana project. The project APA is acting with the framework of a private-public cooperation with several companies. That is why we also call it as a result as a network of networks. The private logistic network and the public network of infrastructure management are connected with each other in order to enable both partners to optimize their processes. By this way, the data generated in the network can be shared according to the business relation exists between companies through the common set of roles and understanding. And it creates a basis of digital twin for port logistics. Next slide. I would like to briefly present a selection of the measures taken by the HPA. These examples are related to a different mode and transport, starting with maritime shipping. With our project NIVE, we would like to facilitate the port call coordination between all stakeholders in a more efficient way through a truly digital communication channel. By using the common information platform, the port call information will be made more transparent to all parties involved. By this mean not only terminal operators, vessel terminal coordinator services or pilots, but also all services providers for ship supplies, fresh water, tugs, etc. can allocate their resources more efficiently, also in the case of status changes. In the inland waterway in Germany, the digitalization is still at the beginning. Here we will equip our berths with sensors and can detect the occupancy status in real time. Using DI applications, we will be able to allocate the berths more efficiently and customer friendly, as they will see occupation status online and can avoid searching traffic for berth in the port, thus reducing the CO2 emission too. Next slide. On the land side, rail and road transport needs to be considered. The Transport Rail Next Generation project is located at the heart of the railway infrastructure in the Port of Hamburg. As the data center for the entire rail infrastructure, it ensures efficient operation and a steady flow of traffic on the approximately 300 kilometers of railway network inside the Port of Hamburg. In addition to advantages in maintenance, which can be carried out without interruption the flow of traffic, a steady flow of traffic not only increases the plannability of logistic chains, but also enables low-emission supply to the hinterland. This is particularly important for Hamburg, as Europe's largest railway port in 2020. We transported 2.6 million TEU into the hinterland. On the road, the HBA has implemented the world's first real-time road network. This allows vehicles to communicate with each other and with the traffic lights. As a result, traffic light switching can be optimized in real time by quantum-inspired algorithm. This increases the plannability of logistics too, as traffic flows steadily and at the same time reduce emissions from port traffic. All in all, it shows that digitalization is an important key for efficient port and sustainability for the transformation to a zero-emission port. It becomes apparent not only that digitalization fosters sustainability, but especially that ecological and economic interests are not in conflict with each other. Sustainable corporate governance, the only proper path for ports. Next slide. With this statement, I would like to end my presentation and summarize some main facts. Next slide. Overall, it became clear that the Port of Hamburg has been playing a pioneering role in the field of shore power since 2016 in Europe, and it's consistently expanding its commitment in this and other areas. The focus on the use of hydrogen will continue to intensify in the coming years, bringing green logistic chains ever closer to reach. This is flanked by HBA as a driver of digitization for the efficient use of existing infrastructure in simultaneous reduction of greenhouse gases and pollution. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward for your question and fruitful discussion. Thanks.
Perfect. Tino, you were right on time. The German are fantastic in terms of time management. You have always a good lesson to teach us. Okay, next presentation would be Dr. Dong-Kyu Choi from the SME. And let's hear about your perspective about digitization and energy.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dong-Kyu Choi, working for DSME as a head of R&D Institute. DSME is world top-tier shipbuilding company. The yard is located in Jeju Island, and which is 1 hour distance from Busan by car. I'd like to present the DSME's efforts for decarbonization and digitalization as a shipbuilder. This slide shows my presentation. EU and UN disclosed the ambitious decarbonization plan, and so IMO's plan will be accelerated. To keep the roadmap, DSME is working for decarbonization, and the roadmap will be disclosed. Along with the decarbonization, digitalization is also very important, since operation and maintenance can be optimized by digitalization, and so CO2 can be reduced. And so DSME roadmap for digitalization will be introduced. And then DSME R&D facilities for decarbonization and digitalization will be introduced. EU and UN aims net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050, but current IMO's plan is just 50% reduction by 2050. And so the current IMO's plan will be revised to meet EU and UN's plan. According to the current plan, the 30% of reduction will be applied for gas carrier like LPG carrier and LNG carrier. And 45 to 50% of CO2 reduction should be applied for container ship, have been applied from this year. And 30% of CO2 reduction will be applied from 2025 for tankers. And EXI and CII will be activated from next year. EXI will be applied to existing vessels, and some kind of measures like engine power limitation should be applied to meet the EXI. And for CII regulation, the continuing management of CO2 emissions should be applied, not to get D or E grade. So, considering the lifetime of ships around 20 years, to meet the zero carbon by 2050, we think that the commercial solution of zero carbon should be appeared by 2030. It's our target. This figure shows DSME technology roadmap for decarbonization. The short term is LNG fueled ship, the mid term will be ammonia, and the long term would be the hydrogen. LNG is used for the bridge fuel to carbon-free fuel, at least by 2035, I think. and other methods like hull form optimization and propeller optimization with USD, and the air lubrication system and the shaft generator will be applied to add additional FOC reduction. And the shaft generator with ESS can reduce the FOC consumption more by the removal of spinning reserve or peak shaving. By using the wind power by the rotor sail and wing sail, the more CO2 reduction can be possible. And the various CO2 capturing methods are now being considered, but the economics should be carefully considered. The methanol can be alternative, but by using the ethanol, the CO2 reduction is only around less than 10%, and so the direction should be toward the biomethanol or e-methanol. Ammonia is emerged as a strong major alternative fuel, carbon-free fuel, because the engine makers have planned for commercialization of the ammonia engine in the near future. Hydrogen would be the ultimate carbon-free fuel, but its storage and transportation is very difficult. CO2 capturing from the blue hydrogen production is emerged, and CO2 should be transported by CO2 carrier, and the CO2 carrier market, we think that will come very near future from the small vessel, about 12K capacity. And in the mid and long-term perspective, liquid hydrogen carrier will be emerged. This slide shows additional methods to reduce the CO2 emission. We get about 2% FOC reduction every year by hull form and propeller optimization and energy saving device like pre-swirl stator, cap pin, and rudder bulb pin, and duct, etc. And air lubrication system is realized by by injection of compressed air at the bottom of the ship, and which result in net power saving of 5 to 8%. By applying the shaft generator on the main engine shaft, the energy saving is about 3 to 5%. By using the wind power by rotor sail, the energy saving would be about 6 to 9%, because we can get the rotor of 5 meter diameter and the height of 10 meter. We can get the FOC saving by 3%, and we recommend the installation of rotor of 2 or 3 to LNG carrier and the VLCC, and so net power saving can be 6 to 9% for the LNG carrier and the VLCC. And we are now developing this rotor cell, and the real scale test will be conducted is now conducted in this year. And for the air lubrication system, we applied our technology to 34 LNG carriers and 6 container ships. And for shaft generator, we applied the technology for 24 LNG carriers, 12 LPG carriers, and 6 VLCC. The technology was developed by ourselves, and the technology can be integrated to our smart ship solution of DS4, and the smart and integrated energy saving can be realized. DSME onboard carbon capture system is now in development, and the ammonia water is used as observant. The small scale pilot test was done this year, and we'll install the 1.5 ton per hour scale equipment. We'll install the equipment on new building LNG carrier by JDP the owner. We designed the ammonia fueled ship for VLCC and container ship with ammonia fuel gas supply system development. We applied the fuel cell to real operating submarine, and we have expertise of fuel cell and batteries and the propulsion motor. We built eco-friendly fuel and electrification land-based test system for the fuel cell test and battery and the propulsion motor test. We are now developing liquid CO2 carrier from 12.5K capacity to 100K capacity. For the LH carrier, we are developing, and for small scale hydrogen carrier of 20K to 40K, we'll use the Type C tank. And for larger tank, we consider Type B or membrane tank. For the ammonia carrier, there is no any technical difficulties because some VLGC is now transport ammonia as a cargo. For the ammonia carrier, the ammonia will be used for fuel naturally for the future ammonia carrier. We are considering the high manganese steel for LH storage because high manganese steel has very cheaper price, material price, and the fabrication price compared to the stainless steel. Regarding the insulation system, special care should be taken because if the same insulation will be applied, the boil-up ratio will be 10 times bigger compared to the LNG. And so vacuum insulation should be applied for Type C tank, and polite PUF with vacuum insulation panel will be installed for Type B or membrane tanks. From this slide, I'd like to introduce the digitalization technology. Smart ship will be connected to onshore monitoring center, and onshore monitoring and consulting services is possible. The data will be used for simulation, and by the digital twin, the data will be used for simulation and predict the future. And so the smart and condition-based maintenance is possible. With the technology of safe navigation, the autonomous vessel can be realized. For the autonomous vessel operation, the port should be digitalized, and cross communication between the ship and port is crucial. DSME developed smart ship solution of DS4, which stands for DSME Smart Ship Solution. By DS4, the vessel will be connected to the onshore service center, and remote fleet monitoring and voyage data analysis and optimum operation consulting can be possible. By the voyage planning and performance monitoring, smart navigation is possible as well. And with the navigation guidance and collision avoidance support, the safe navigation is also possible. By the monitoring and diagnosis, the smart maintenance is possible. The tailored service for the smart ship is possible for the smart LNG and the smart LNG carrier and the smart LNG fueled ship is possible. For the LNG fueled container ship or LNG fueled VLCC, the crews are not familiar with the LNG operation, and so operation and maintenance guidance by the DS4 is very helpful for the operation of the vessel. This slide shows our autonomous ship development. We built the test vessel of DANV, which stands for DSME Autonomous Navigation Vessel, was built in December 2021 for the autonomous navigation test. In the ship remote control center, the remote control can be possible with the radar and camera and AIS monitoring. Safe navigation can be possible by the accident-free operation and autopilot support. The condition-based maintenance solution is possible by equipment monitoring and vibration analysis. We are working with the Busan Port and Port of Rotterdam for digital interaction with smart ship with the smart port. Seamless communication of the voyage information from the ship and port planning result in very efficient operation of the arrival and cargo handling and departure. The idealized just-in-time arrival can cause the voyage optimization and which result in CO2 reduction. For the digitalization and decarbonization, there are many facilities in our R&D institute. In the shipyard, Smart Shipyard Operation Center is operated for digital yard. And Energy System Research Center is operated using LNG as test fleet for the various equipment tests. And in the crew training center, the crew training is possible through the OTS and the VR. In the Siung R&D campus, the newly built towing tank and cavitation tunnel is in operation. And for decarbonization, eco-friendly fuel and electrification land-based test site is in operation. In the DS4 show operation data, the data from operating ships are gathered and analyzed for the optional operation guidance service. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Oops. Thank you, Dr. Choi. Now, we're going to finish with the grandiose last presentation by Simon Fick from ENG, and we'll see what they have in mind.
All right, last but not least, first of all, I want to thank the organizers for putting on this wonderful event and for inviting someone like myself. Of course, as with everyone else, my thoughts go out to the people affected by the tragic events in Itaewon last week. Myself, I live 1 kilometer away from there. I have 2 points that I hope to get across today. They're not necessarily in my slides. One thing is that I think right now is an incredibly interesting time to be in logistics. So I hope that each and every one of you go back home and recommend to your friends and family a career in logistics. I say that also because there's a lot of people that have left the industry the last 2 years because it's not necessarily been the easiest environment to work in. My second hope is that we have COP27 kicking off in a few days, and it's wonderful to see all the improvements and innovations that many of you are making in this space. I do believe that we can still do a lot more, and I think we can do a lot more together. And I'm based in Korea, and if anyone is interested in having a conversation with myself about what we can do in Korea and what a freight forwarder can do to contribute, I'm very happy to pick up that conversation. So I will talk a little bit about what we see happening in the industry, and a lot of you have presented today a lot of the challenges that each and every one of you are facing. I feel a little bit naked standing up here because, unlike most of you, Kühne + as a freight forwarder doesn't really possess any assets. No ships, no planes to speak of, no warehouses. We have a lot of offices, we have warehouses, we've got a truck here and there. Most of all, we've got a great cohort of people that work day in and day out to serve our customers. And one of the big challenges that we see, not because of the last 2 years necessarily, is that there's a lot of data floating around, and a lot of our customers are struggling to make sense of that information. And that is what we're trying to do to help them to actually be able to execute their supply chains. You also have to keep in mind that the majority of our customers are not multinationals. They are small companies, sometimes one man or one woman shows. These are companies that does not have dedicated logistics or transportation departments that can afford to throw people at digesting some of these challenges. What I present to you today is one of the things that we work on, is a better way to plan specifically in the space of ocean freight, what we call sea logistics. And what we do is we take a lot of the information that a lot of you generate, and we try to turn that into insights and actionable insights that actually can be used to better plan supply chains. And we enrich that information with other data sources, such as weather information, and we also look at sort of news updates to see whether there are trucker strikes about to happen, port strikes. These are not unknown phenomena in the world of logistics. And we try to bring that all together in one place so that you can actually go in, look at what your shipment options are, and also from a sustainability perspective, you can evaluate, do I want to pick one shipping line over another, and you can use that information to make your decisions on. And that actually turns into insights that can be used to better manage your portfolio. You can manage your risk in a different way. We had many customers throughout the past year or two that were very eager to look at how many vessels were sitting outside ports. Go figure, right? So here you can actually also see what some of the alternatives are. You can evaluate the reliability, the environmentally friendliness of each and every service, and then if you so desire, you can take that conversation further and actually put it into a transactional flow where you start to talk about rates, prices, and so on. We've had a lot of good feedback from our customers, and we know that there's a strong desire to enrich that as well. And we also have some good partners that we work with to try to promote the sustainability angle. We had the Port of Barcelona talking about America's Cup. We're working together with one particular gentleman, Boris Hammond, who actually sails solo across the world, also to make sure that we promote not only sort of the enrichment of this data, but that we also promote a sustainable angle to it as well. That's it from my side. I hope I leave some time for Q&A.
Okay, perfect. So now it is time for discussion. I have prepared for each of the presenters as a moderator a list of annoying questions. I did my best. So I will we'll begin with Tino. Are you still here, Tino, just to be sure?
Yes, I'm still.
Perfect. Perfect. So I'll begin with you based upon your presentation, and it's something I've as an observer of the industry for the last, I would say, quarter century. It's becoming quite self-evident. It was very evident today that the role of a port authority is basically changing quite rapidly. You know, conventionally a port authority was some kind of infrastructure and stakeholder manager, and now what I see about port authorities is essentially involved in all sorts of ventures, all sorts of innovative process. And my question to you in particular, and so you're involved in decarbonization, you're becoming an energy platform. Why port, do you think, from your perspective, from HPA, which is, I would say, a gigantic organization, quite innovative, and I would say with impressive capabilities, why do you feel compelled to be involved in these, let's start with digitization. Why do you think it's important for you and for step in? Why nobody else is stepping in except the Port Authority?
Yes, it's a good question, and I try to find an easy answer. And our point of view, the Port Authority is spin in the network because we are neutral, competition neutral company which is able to bring all players together, which work inside the port. The port is a collection of a lot of services, a lot of companies, and a lot of processes, which are all, or more or less all, data combined, and we need a neutral platform for data exchange. And we think that this is a neutral role of a port and a port authority in particular. And of course, we have a lot of port authorities, and you mentioned in your presentation that there are a lot of single point of truth or point of databases, and I think it's a hard work to go step by step. First, inside a port for itself with all the connections it's had, and on the second step to combine all ports, of course, in the world, and also freight forwarders and so on. So it's a huge challenge in my point of view, It's obviously on the first view, it's totally easy, and if you are in the details, it's really difficult. And so the port authority as a as a neutral player in the competition is it's a real trust handler of the data. So that's the point of view, and we think that it is our born issue to do this role and to overtake this role. But in the reality, there are a lot of other players in the world who think that they can do it as well. And so it's a long way, and I think we are, let me say, when I say from 1 to 10, we are at the point of 4, 6 or whatever in that area, and there's a lot of work to do to bring all these informations together. In my point, there is one example which is not so strange, and if you see the area of the airports and all this, the combined worldwide one system could be a good example also for our business.
Perfect, thank you. I have another one for you. It's a second point. It's also a trend I'm observing. I assume it's probably linked with decarbonization. Is wherever I look, I see ports becoming energy generation and distribution platforms. Again, it's an interesting new trend as well, which was not the case before, I will assume. And of course, Hamburg, you talk about all of these fuels. Again, it's the same question as before. Why do you think you feel compelled to become, in some ways, a supplier and a broker for energy?
No, that's not the right view. We are not a complier and supplier for energy. I think we are an enabler to bring partners together and to work and give, of course, our main topic is, of course, space, and to organize the space inside the port. And we are not an energy producer or something like that. We need energy, of course, for the port for itself, for our business, for our running, and therefore we need good solutions for renewable energy and for a zero emission port for the HPA for itself, for their own business. But this is only a small view. The port is much more, of course, and in this case we are not the main player in that role. We are an enabler to bring all these partners together which are in these businesses.
Yeah, but I'm sure you also have a powerful factor of influence, and we'll see where this is going to lead us. So thank you. Those were my 2 points, and I'll move on now with Dr. Choi. Concerning shipbuilding, which is again quite impressive. The SME have quite an ambitious I would say ambitious fuel transition program in terms of the creation of these ships, the creation of this technology. But my concern, and maybe you can comment on this, is market segmentation. Because we have been accustomed for a long period of time, shipping industry is pretty much essentially one fuel. And now we're moving towards a transition, and we're moving towards several fuels that are going to be staged at different points in time, maybe, or at the same time. And in that case, it might create, again, I mentioned, a segmentation of fuel, and could lead to some problems. Maybe some ports might be able to supply some type of fuels, while others might not. Some shipbuilders might be able to. So what's your view about this segmentation taking place? Do you think the market is going to become segmented, or do you have a preference? Do you think it's going to, segmentation is only a transition phase, and maybe in the future we're going to switch back to one fuel, and then everybody's going to be in the same business?
I think that this time is a transition period, I think. If some kind of fuel is confined to some port, if so, the fuel cannot be the alternative, I think. For the alternative fuel, the bunkering is possible all around the world, I think. Like the LNG can be supplied over the world. and so it can become the alternative. But methanol, I think there is some limitation, I think. And the methanol, as I said, the CO2 reduction effect is only less than only 10%, around 10%, compared to 23% of LNG. And so the direction should be go to the bio or e-methanol. But as you know, biomethanol has a limitation. It is related with food. And the e-methanol, it is very, very expensive this time. And so it's not my expectation, but my hope that all the alternatives should be emerged as one solution, and it will be better for shipbuilding company because we can concentrate it on only one. But this time there are many options, and the design should be distributed, and so there is some difficulties, and so I think that this is a transition time, and the alternative is LNG, and LNG will be long bridge to CO2 free fuel. That would be the ammonia or hydrogen, I think.
So the point is, whatever it's going to be able to build it. That's the point. It's a safe strategy. You want to let the market essentially decide, but you have all those contingency. We'll provide you the vessel, whatever the fuel type. Okay, that's a smart way to do things. Second question is the digitization of the ships that you're proposing is quite impressive in terms of all this essentially self-monitoring equipment. Do you think it could become for your company a form of product differentiation that is an advantage, a market advantage in regard to other shipbuilders, or it's basically all the shipbuilders are going to offer some kind of a standard digital type of product in terms of shipbuilding?
For the Korean shipbuilding company, I think that for the big three, the digitalization or smart ship solution is some kind of standard. The owners want the smart ship solution as a default.
So it's basically expectations, and then you provide according to market expectations.
And the use of the digital ship or use of the smart ship solution can be the competitive element for the shipbuilding company. If we use the smart ship very effectively through the data collection, and we can improve our design, and we can provide optimal operation service or maintenance service, then it could be a competitive point of some shipbuilding company, I think.
That will be an interesting issue to see different companies offering different digital solution. Okay, so we'll see where this is going to lead us. Thank you. Then Simon, I have also some questions for you. Are you ready?
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay, let's go. So your 6-Explorer platform is quite impressive. It looks like it's the data and the information behind under the hood is quite extensive, to say the least. But what I've noticed, and we are hinting towards that, is it's some kind of a search engine. That is, it gives you path, it gives you opportunities, or it gives you choices. But is it provide a cost estimate and booking capabilities, or this is separate?
Today, that's separate. So today we do not provide a cost estimate because based on the sort of, it's basically, as you say, sort of a search engine for shipping schedules enriched with a lot of data and our interpretation of that data. In order to provide a price, we need a little bit more information in terms of equipment availability, how much you're shipping and all that. So we do not put that in there today. Whether we do in the future, I think, is to be seen. There is an option for customers who go in there to then move into sort of a transactional flow and actually make a booking with Kuehne+Nagel if that's what they desire.
So that's a tool to basically to attract customer and to give them the, because all the options you are capable of offering the booking of these services, I will assume.
Yes, absolutely. But it is mostly, and that's what our customers predominantly use it for, a planning tool. So, because many times companies will go in and look at many different options before they decide to cut a purchase order and then decide to go into actual shipping. So this is an opportunity for them to go in and look at what are the available options, what are the sort of parameters that I'm looking at, what's important to me, and then they can make sort of their decisions on that basis.
Looks like a bit like e-commerce.
Well, it could move in that direction. There's a lot of moving parts, and that's why it's taking some time to also put this together.
Perfect. That's very, very interesting. Second question I have is, we know that there are increasingly pressures, and it's going to be regulatory to have a form of carbon footprint reporting in terms of each movement. If you move a container, let's say, from one origin to destination, you might run some calculations. Is your platform offering this reporting services? And if it does, is those reporting services, I would say, compatible or acceptable by the regulators or the agencies?
Yeah, so we need to sort of expand on that one a little bit, because what the platform does is that it gives you an sort of estimated carbon footprint. So you can go in and see, depending on the service that you pick, this is the carbon emissions that are related to that. When it comes to sort of actual carbon sort of consumed, you have to look historic and you have to look at on a shipment basis. So that's sort of a separate part of the flow, and carbon reporting across all modes of transport to standards so that customers can go out and offset that, should they so desire, is something that we can do as well, just not as part of this tool.
That would be, again, added value. That would be interesting, because it's some expectation in the future that carbon footprint will be a greater part of the decision, of the routing decision and the supply chain decision.
Yes, and I think one of the key things we as an industry need is to improve on the standards for how we calculate carbon emissions, because today these are not Kuehne+Nagel determined, these are sort of external bodies that determine this, and today it's very much sort of averages on averages that are setting the standard for how much is sort of the carbon emissions per mile traveled on certain corridors. So I think there's a lot of improvement to be done there. I could imagine, I'm not an expert here, that the same would go if you start to introduce carbon tax, right? How do you actually calculate it? I think becomes pretty important.
But eventually, that's something you could be added up to for additional value, that's for sure. There's quite very good potential there. My last question, then we're going to move on to the audience if you have also some questions you would like to raise. So at this point, it's port to port.
Correct.
Any plans to, on maybe selected market, to expand this into inland logistics?
Yes. That's a plan. I don't have a timeline, but the plan is to do that, yes. And also to potentially more modes of transport. As you can see, it's purely just sea freight based today.
Okay, thank you. With this said, that's all I could do. I try my best to grill every single member with annoying questions. So any of you have annoying questions? Or regular questions? Because for any member of the audience, for the Emperor Port Authority, for Daewoo, for Kuehne+Nagel, I'll let our host decide who's going to get the microphone, and I'll simply let them speak. So I see Tim, I see somebody else in the back, so just send microphones.
This is a question for Dr. Choi. I see you were talking about the onboard carbon capture, and there was you referred to, there's a pilot test in August this year. Would you be able to tell us whether that test was successful and to what extent carbon dioxide was removed from the exhaust. Because frankly, if you had a perfect carbon capture system that would work with existing fuels, that would solve everybody's problem immediately.
The pyro test was performed during the gas trial, but the pyro plant is very small, capacity of 50 kilogram per hour. And so it is very small, and we cannot talk about the applicability, but the test objective is to confirm the operation. But and so the operation was confirmed. We will and for the economic value, the capacity should be more than 1 ton per hour. And so it is not the time to talk about the real application. And so we are now doing the JDP with some owner to install the 1.5 ton per hour facility on the vessel. If the carbon capturing has economics, then every problem can be completely solved. But as you know, CO2 capturing has economic problem, and so careful evaluation of economics should be prepared, I think.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Doctor.
Hello. Hello everyone. I'm a student from Busan National University. Great presentation by the panel. I have a question to Mr. Simon, if I'm not wrong. So you said that it's a great time to be in logistics industry. So I have this question, like why would someone want to be in this industry going forward, being an industry that is showing such high, chances for automation? It can be like fully automated, and going forward, like I have heard a lot, people are very interested in automating the ports and stuff. So not being an engineer, why would someone be still interested in going in this industry? And also a point to Mr. Rodriguez, he asked about the resilient of automated and traditional port. I think the traditional conventional one will be more resilient because the human factor would be able to factor in the different situations and things that the automation might not be able to. Thank you.
All right, so I can start, but maybe there's others who want to pitch in. So thank you for the question. It's a great one. I believe that what we need in the industry is a beautiful mix of technology and people working together. I think there are many aspects of what we've seen today where automation is absolutely possible. The reality is, in sort of our line of work, is that most of the processes we are involved in, they cannot be fully automated. You need the technology, but you still need the people involved to make sure that things can move, not just between ports or inside ports, but point to point, because nobody wants their container to just move from one port to another. They need it from where it's created to where it's consumed. And there you still need a lot of sort of human intervention. I think it's a great industry to be in because there's a lot of interesting and very complex problems and challenges that still are to be solved. It's not, to sort of use the phrase sort of Uberization, it's not that we take one city and optimize supply and demand within that. This is the entire globe that we are trying to connect better and smarter, and therefore I think the more smart people we can throw at all these interesting problems that we have out there, the better. There's also in the last couple of years been a huge sort of increase in startup investments into the industry, something that we didn't see many sort of 5-10 years ago. And I think that's also incredibly interesting. And I hope even with sort of the economic tide turning, that we will still continue to see a flourishing startup environment and many new entrants coming in to challenge also the existing players and the status quo. So I think you've got a bright future ahead of you, and I hope you stay in the industry.
Yes, please stay. To go back to the second answer, the question about the resilience, again, as far as I can tell, maybe somebody has better information than I do, these automated terminal facilities have not been truly stress tested upon specific circumstances, so we don't know yet. Again, automation works fantastically when it works within design parameters. So when it's within these parameters, things are going to function well and better than with people. But as soon as you start to get something going wrong, and it requires, I would say, some kind of innovative imagination and adaptation, and we're going to find out, and that's what we don't know. That I'm very curious to have a better answer or a better overview of this potential point of failure, you could say, in automation.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for providing us such an insightful and amazing presentation. I'm Chloe Hyun Jung from Donghua University, and my question is for Mr. Rodriguez from Hofstra University. So I have one question for the point of blockchain from your presentation. Like you said exactly, the blockchain helps to get much of like transparency and the cost, also the time efficiency, like overall. But especially this kind of like economic downturn right now. But as you mentioned, I don't see still a lot of like usage of, like blockchain in the maritime supply chains, though it's applied to many fields internationally, from like finance to, like retails as well. And I agree with you at the point that we'll eventually get there to leverage blockchain for sure, but what exactly make it complicated to apply now? Furthermore, in your view, what needs to be resolved to get there? Thank you.
For what I understand, again, I'm not an expert on this, but for what I've been able to guess or observe, is you have to have a truly, I would say, comprehensive application. You need people to trust the system and which platform. Because there are different stakeholders right now. Again, there's Maersk pushing one. I think there are other companies that are pushing their own system. So what's going to be the standard? Which platform it's going to be? And are you willing to volunteer the data? Because when you have a blockchain, you essentially reveal how the sausage is made. And sometimes you don't want to know, or you don't want to reveal exactly how things are working internally. And that's why that might take some time. And that the risk, say, why should I have a platform where essentially everybody abide to a very similar standard, and most shipping lines or most people in logistics, they have their own internal process, and they wouldn't necessarily want to reveal to the outsiders how it works. And I would say with blockchain, it's essentially some kind of what would be, it reveals, or if you wish, it exposes things, and for good or for bad. And I'm not too sure in an industry which is very based upon interpersonal trust and relationship between carriers, their customers, and other carriers and terminal operators, how can you synthesize or automate this type of trust or relationship structure into some kind of a technology? Again, I'm not entirely convinced, but again, we're going to get there. But it may take a little bit longer than we expect. And with this said, I think we are 5 minutes over time. So are we allowed for a last question, or are we closing now the day? Yes, looks like someone. Oh, you want to have a...
예, 저 제동규 전무님께 질문이
So I have a question to Mr. Choi of DSME.
use Korea because the well understanding with Mr. Choi. 그 지금
So I think that globally right now, if we look at marine logistics and shipping, decarbonization is a major trend. By 2050, we have to reach net zero. And I understand that DSME is also engaging in much efforts towards that end. But as I understand, there are many interested stakeholders that you work together with. So, for example, there are the energy suppliers. And if we consider the point of view of energy suppliers, you talk about methanol and hydrogen. But if we consider the infrastructure that could actually physically supply the fuel to you, they're non-existent, and going to be very difficult for these operators to invest in the technology and invest in the infrastructure when it has not been proven yet, when the market has not been completely proven yet. So I feel that this is a little bit of a big adventure for DSME. What are your thoughts on this? And my other question, a follow-up question, is that ultimately your long-term plan is also going the route of in the direction of hydrogen. Do you also have any plans to develop SMRs or small modular reactors? And also, lastly, with DS4, your smart solution, I do have some questions about the DS4 initiative. This solution, I think that there are similar smart solutions that are already out there in the market, but to manage this smart solution, particularly from the point of view of security, you need to have very robust technology to guard against cybersecurity threats. Do you have those right now?
저도 한국말로 하겠습니다.
I would like to respond in Korean as well. When it comes to future energy sources, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, as a shipbuilder, hopefully I really wish I had a crystal ball, because I want there to be only one fuel solution. Honestly, for a shipbuilder, that is the case. LNG includes hydrocarbons, and so it is not carbon-free, and that is why we are finding ourselves in the situation we are in. When the discussion was about SOx and NOx, we thought that LNG was the great answer. But now when we talk about CO2 emissions and zero carbon, then we know that because LNG is ultimately a fossil fuel as well, that we have to move away from LNG. As I mentioned before my presentation, I honestly don't know where we're headed. I think that when it comes to ammonia, it can have some toxicity, and so that's a big hurdle. And we would have to then convert it to green ammonia, but to make green ammonia, you have to take hydrogen, go through electrolysis, and then produce green hydrogen, and then go through air separation to create the necessary units using this chemical reaction at a furnace heat of about 1,000 degrees or so, and then create the ammonia, and then move the ammonia, and then onshore you have to crack the ammonia again so that you can get access to the energy inside. So as you can see, this is quite energy intensive. So just for the purposes of making transport easier for us to go through that very involved process, I don't think that that is necessarily economically viable. However, if we look at hydrogen, hydrogen can go through also through electrolysis, and if you were to, we have to cool hydrogen to about minus 120 degrees, I believe it is, and that requires a lot of energy, obviously, as you can see, to convert it to green or blue hydrogen, and the density is so low that if we were to compare the same amounts of LNG versus the same amounts of hydrogen, you need 3 times as much cargo. That's how difficult it is to move and store a hydrogen. And if you do installation, the boil-off ratio is about maybe 10 times that of LNG. So that makes it very difficult, which is why for ammonia and hydrogen, the commercially available solutions are so difficult. I think that LNG and methanol is not the right solution. But when it comes to ammonia, there are some advantages because the internal combustion engine would be created by about 2025. So I think that ultimately we are going to work with ammonia and then later phase out of that and go to hydrogen, because with the economies of scale with hydrogen, then we will see more benefits of hydrogen and ultimately we will go to the roots of hydrogen. And you talked about SMRs. So you're talking about the reactors, correct? Yes. You're talking about small modular reactors. So there are many types of SMRs. There are light water types and also salt molten types. I believe that's the name it was. For the salt malt types, they're under development. It's going to take a long time for it to be commercialized. The light water type SMRs, we are working with Korea Hydropower and we do have a solution at our disposal. But to have the SMR provided as a floating type plant, if we were to make that happen as a floating SMR, so as you understand, the nuclear reactors, it's very difficult to try to build them on land because of resistance. And so we are thinking of maybe of an offshore possibility. And currently we do have a similar project underway. You also asked about DS4 cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is very important for us. We have received the necessary certification and standards. We have gone through penetration tests as well. So because obviously if we cannot have robust security, then it makes it very dangerous. We're just collecting and monitoring data for now, but we also have to later on control the data. So, because if we go autonomous, then we have to do remote control. But if we're doing remote control of the ship and there's a cybersecurity attack, then that would be disastrous. So when it comes to security, we are obviously very cognizant of the risks involved, and we are developing robust solutions.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much.
So, can I? Just one last question.
Please go ahead.
Okay, my question toward Simon. This is about a vertical integration. Carriers are expanding their territory into logistics. They're buying airplanes. So there are many opinions on this. Some say that this is not the first time the carriers are buying the physical assets like airplanes and logistics companies. And I told that it's not going to be successful because first, they're competing with their customers. And second, the carrier's main purpose is managing their assets. And logistics providers' purpose is to satisfy their customers. It's completely two different disciplines. So it's not going to be working. That's one side. And the other end, or the opinion is that, well, one of our speakers actually said this in the morning. Now the carriers cannot meet the demands of their customers because for the past 3 years, because of the supply chain crisis, they cannot deliver the goods and they cannot satisfy their customers. So they're buying many physical assets on the land side or aviation. So I read your bio, and I know that you have experience also. You worked 10 years in Musk, so you have a carrier's experience, and at the same time now you are working for logistics companies. I guess that your answer might be very interesting. So I'd like to hear your take on this carrier's business expansion.
How much trouble do you want me to get in? No, so yes, you're right. I used to work for AP Moller Maersk for 10 years. So from a Kühne+Nagel perspective, honestly, this is nothing new. The fact that our suppliers are also our competitors, and in some cases are also our customers, because we actually serve some of them, especially when it comes to things like marine spare parts. So we have this interesting relationship where we need each other. Sometimes we go head to head, and sometimes we actually serve each other the other way around. I don't think that's anything new or anything unusual, and I think that will only continue. Of course, with all the major shipping lines, with all the major alliances, we have excellent relationships. Sometimes there's ebbs and flows. I don't think that would change either. When it comes sort of specifically to this sort of integrated strategy and the carrier's ability to sort of move into sort of the more sort of traditional 3PL space, the freight forwarders and so on, I will speak sort of more on a personal note. I have my serious doubts. And I think it's also, I think one of the other speakers mentioned that it's still to be proven that this strategy will bear fruit. I saw it firsthand when I used to work for a shipping line, because this has been attempted before multiple times, and it struggled to get off the ground at that stage. I think the big difference this time is that there's a lot more money involved, because the shipping lines have made quite a lot of money the last couple of years, and of course that cash can be turned into investments, but can they do this at scale and actually be able to execute supply chains, not port to port, airport to airport, but also point to point, I think is to be seen. One of the things that we discussed as prep, we had a sort of a call before sort of the conference was, and I didn't make the statement, but I can make it now, is that I don't think we've learned a whole lot of lessons from the pandemic. I think a lot of the behaviors we're seeing now, we've seen many times before, and you see it with the rate levels as well. We've not only gone to sort of pre-pandemic levels, we've actually in some cases gone below that. So many of the behaviors displayed have not changed at all. So I think hopefully that answers and gives a little bit of color. I think that the jury is still out whether they will be successful. On a personal note, I have my doubts.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. And that concludes. Again, I would like to thank my co-panelists and also our Tino in Germany. What time is it right now for you?
9 o'clock. 9 o'clock a.m. It's okay.
Oh, it's okay.
Problem.
Oh, it's okay.
Not my day.
Okay, good. Perfect. So I'll leave it to our host to conclude. Again, thank you. You've been good. You've been great. So maybe we'll have some beer later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Please give them a big round of applause. 이것으로써 모든 일정을
This concludes today's BIPC 2022. Thank you so much.
네, 오늘 3개 세션을
We have, through 3 sessions, tried to look into the future, and I do hope that this was a meaningful time for all of you. I do believe it has. As I mentioned before, the dinner reception, the welcome reception that we were supposed to have today has been canceled due to the fact that Korea is in a national state of mourning. We ask for your deep and kind understanding. This BIPC 2022 is being held here at the International Convention Center here at the Busan Port. And with this, we conclude all of our official proceedings. If you have parked here at this building, please get your parking validated free of charge. With this, I would like to say goodbye. My name is Chung Hee-jung of KNN. Thank you very much.